Recognizing the member for Burnaby North.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I appreciate the opportunity to be able to speak to this proposed legislation today. I want to start by thanking the member for Surrey South for her years of service to this place, to our province, and her commitment to gender equity and to accessibility. I am wishing her all the best in her next role, and I know we and all of Canada will benefit from her next role. I had a chance to be at an event with her and the member for Cowichan Valley last week, and as the member for Surrey South put it, we all have a lot in common. One of those things is a belief that women deserve to be fairly and equitably paid for their work. And as many of us in this House know, too many women in BC are still making less than men. A pay gap that has many causes, historic and systemic barriers to types of employment and higher paying positions, the persistent gap of unpaid labour and care work, both in the workplace and outside the workplace, the historic undervaluing and precarity of the care sector, including professions such as early childhood educators, healthcare aides, and those in environmental services, and so many more, and blatant discrimination. We know the gap is not just about gender. The pay gap is racialized, and it's larger for Indigenous women and racialized women. And we know wages are lower amongst those with disabilities and newcomers to our community. The pay gap impacts on other aspects of gender equity. Vulnerability to violence and ability to leave unsafe homes or situations can depend on financial resources and economic opportunities. Ability to participate in public life and leadership can also depend on income and the financial resources of those around you. As a lifelong advocate for gender equity, I am dedicated to working towards closing the gender pay gap by addressing systemic discrimination in the workplace, and pay transparency will be a key tool in this work. I think that everyone here knows that, unfortunately, in 2022, systemic discrimination in the workplace continues to be an issue in BC. Public transparency will help us shine a light on this discrimination and the persistence of wage inequity. We can add the carrot to this stick by seizing the opportunity to celebrate successes and elevate leaders who are not only publicly sharing their wage gaps, but working to address them. We know the majority of part-time and lower-paid workers are women. They are often mothers, grandmothers, and aunties who are responsible for looking after their families and communities. And many of them continue to face barriers in the workplace. Working towards equal pay for equal work and to ending systemic discrimination in the workplace is important to our communities and to our economy, and is something we are committed to addressing through legislation. I appreciate the member from Surrey South's efforts and her sincere commitment to this important issue, and I know that we can use some of the good work the member has done as we head into consultations on pay transparency legislation this spring. We will, however, be taking a much broader view. We know that Indigenous women, racialized women, Two-Spirit people, and non-binary and transgender people also face barriers in the workplace and economy that others do not. We know a pay gap exists for those with disabilities, and accessibility in the workplace is essential. We also know that newcomers face discrimination and barriers to economic opportunities. The Canadian Women's Foundation estimates that Indigenous women working full-time, full years earn 65 cents for every dollar earned by non-Indigenous men. Other estimates, women of color with earnings at just 64% of men's. And while we have less reliable numbers, estimates suggest the gender gap for trans people is between 32 and 40%. We must include them in this work. We need to hear from a variety of groups and individuals so that we can build pay transparency legislation that will help us address pay inequity and move towards equality for everyone. We are also looking at other jurisdictions to learn what has worked well in achieving these objectives. And as we work towards legislation, we need to make sure it works for BC and aligns with existing employment and labour legislation. Our goal is to introduce the legislation in a way that minimizes the administrative burden of new reporting requirements as much as possible. But we know that systemic barriers cannot be broken down by legislation alone. The gender pay gap is caused by multiple systemic factors, which is why we are taking a comprehensive approach to working towards closing the gap. In addition to our mandate commitment to introduce pay transparency legislation, we have taken other steps towards closing the pay gap. And this has included making historic investments in childcare so no parent is forced to choose between their career and their family, because we know that far too many British Columbians have not been able to find childcare they can afford. This will also help address the overrepresentation of women in part-time work. And for the few that needed reminding, the pandemic was a loud and life-disrupting reminder about the role of childcare in our work lives and in our economy. We are providing wage enhancements for early childhood educators to help to address the wages of a workforce that is disproportionately composed of women. This is tangible action to address the pay gap, support our childcare investments, and address historic undervaluing of care work. Raising BC's minimum wage, 60% of wage earners are women, and half of minimum wage earners are over the age of 25. So this is something we've done to close the pay gap. That is a significant amount of our workforce, and raising the minimum wage not only changes the lives of families, but also has a significant impact on our communities and our economy. We raised liquor server wages to meet the minimum wage for workers in the industry, 80% of whom are women. 2 decades after healthcare support workers were laid off and forced into lower-paid jobs, we have brought them back into the healthcare system. These workers provide cleaning and food services, essential healthcare services. These workers are disproportionately racialized women. This is an action on the gender pay gap that must go alongside transparency legislation. We are also investing in skills and jobs training initiatives to open new doors to high-paying and in-demand jobs, including extra support to get women into good-paying trades jobs through community benefit agreements, and opportunities in tech through Canadian Tech Accelerator Program and the Innovator Skills Initiative Program. Provision of upskilling and micro-credentializing, improved transit and transportation infrastructure, as well as working to close the digital divide, are also critical to allow people to participate in the labour force. And doing our part in government to increase the number of women holding good-paying positions within the public service and within the Crown, agencies and boards that support government priorities. Women on public sector boards has increased to more than 51%, more than a 23% increase since 2017. I want to thank the member for her dedication and hard work on this issue, and I want to assure this House of our government's commitment to continue making progress to close the gender pay gap and remove barriers that women in British Columbia face in the workforce. Thank you, Madam Speaker.